It is noon my time, so let's go ahead and get started since we just have one hour with you exciting people. Welcome everyone. I see people rolling in. That's so great. So welcome, welcome. We're so excited to have you. My name is Phi Nguyen. I'm a design strategist at Nonfiction. We are a design studio based out of San Francisco, and we'll tell you much more about ourselves later. I wanted to welcome you and then also give you a quick little briefing on what to expect today. So in the next hour, we have our amazing host and panelists who you'll hear more about in just a second. They will be telling all of us about their perspectives on how we might live, survive, thrive on Mars in the future. So you'll be seeing that on video. And then for you as an attendee, you'll be able to chat with each other in the chat feature in Zoom, and then ask us questions in the Q&A. And what we'll do is our team will pick some of the really pertinent ones, and then Phenom will ask them of the panelists. So yeah, feel free to chat amongst yourselves and respond to what you're seeing on screen in the chat. We would love to engage with you. And two Nonfiction team members will be in the chat with you, dedicated to chat with you. So that will be Nadia and Martis, and they'll introduce themselves in the chat. So I am pleased to introduce Phenom Bagley. She is the creative director and co-founder of Nonfiction. She's also an industrial designer and space architect. I will let you read what you're seeing on screen and let Phenom tell you a bit more about herself as well. So Phenom, take it away.
Thanks, Phi. Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here with all of you for this really incredible thought experiment with these awesome guests that we have today. So my name is Phenom Bagley. I am a partner at Nonfiction, which is the company that organizes this event. This is the first time that we're doing an event like this. Thought experiments always fun, especially when we're thinking about a future that is right here, right in front of us, happening in the next few decades. We are going to Mars, whether we want it or not, right? Many different space agencies are rushing to get there at some point. The human aspect of going to Mars is going to be very important because right now, all the astronauts that we send up to space are highly trained to be living in extreme environments, and for the most part, all goes well. But in the future, when we start sending people to Mars, these people are going to be people like you and me, right? Not particularly athletic, and with social, psychological, and physical needs that are quite different from the superhumans that we send up to space right now. So that's why we are putting together 5 extraordinary people from our circles, very different people, a very different background that I'm going to introduce very shortly, to really think about how far we should think about happiness, what it means to be happy, what it means to be happy so far away from home, and how that can work out for everyone. So very happy to be here. And Phi, I think you have control over this deck. Can you go to the next one? All right, so I would like to introduce you to our 5 panelists. So number 1, we have Reverend Anne Burfind. She's a priest at the Christian community, serving a congregation in Vancouver and Calgary, Canada. Before ordination, she was a Waldorf teacher in Milwaukee. She has worked in the Antarctic, Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. She has lived on a boathouse in the Mississippi River. She's biked solo across the southern US and served 2 years in the Peace Corps at a very high altitude in the Ecuadorian Andes, living in subsistence farmers. She has an undergraduate in political science and a master's degree in education. Today, Anne seeks to help what is most human in us to thrive in the Christian community. The worldwide movement founded in Switzerland in 1922. So welcome, Anne. If you want to add anything to this, please, raise your hand. You don't have to raise your hand. You just.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm in Vancouver, not in Calgary. And no worries. Yeah, and just in a general sense, how my task is how to help humanity to thrive, not necessarily just within the Christian community, but just in
Okay.
general. But thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. Thank you, Anne. So next we have Julien Girard. He's a French physicist and astronomer currently working on the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore in the US. There, he oversees several projects related to soon-to-be-launched James Webb Space Telescope, a joint NASA, ESA, and CSA space telescope that is planned to succeed the Hubble Space Telescope. Julien has a PhD in physics and astrophysics from the Université Claude Bernard in Lyon, France. Julien, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I just want to say that I'm a ground-based astronomer, and now I'm working for space projects. So I'm kind of in the transition. And I used to work in a desert to observe the stars and the galaxies and whatnot in Chile. That was not unlike the background that we have in the back.
Awesome. Thank you, Julien. Next, we have Sam Jenkins, who is going to be acting as a psychologist today. Sam Jenkins is a licensed clinical social worker in California. He has an online individual therapy practice and also supervises several new therapists working towards licensures. Sam has a varied background, including multiple decades in the theater as an actor, director, teacher, and designer. He has taught both theater and therapy at the university level and thoroughly enjoyed many creative pursuits. Sam, do you want to say anything?
No, I think this will be fun, though. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Next, we have Reese. Hi, Reese. Reese Young-Shumskas is a 7-year-old first grade student living in California. He loves space, and you can see him in his spacesuit. He loves manga and also playing Minecraft. Hi, Reese. You want to say hi?
Say hi.
Hi. I'm just nervous.
Oh.
That's okay. We'll have fun during this hour. I promise. And then, awesome. And then last but not least, Michal Ziso. Hi, Michal. She is the founder of Ziso, a studio working at the intersection of architecture, innovation, space, and human equality. A visionary architect practicing for most of a decade in Israel and New York City. She has extensive experience in designing skyscrapers and large-scale urban projects. A graduate of Technion, Israeli Institute of Technology. She also serves in the elite intelligence unit 8200 of the IDF. Taken together as a combination of creative skills, intelligence, data analysis, and technical abilities, which she manifests as a space architect and thought leader. Hi, Michal. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, hi, it's great to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
Awesome. So yes, so we have a spiritual guide, a planetary colonization agnostic, and you'll learn in a minute what that means. A psychologist, a future Martian, and an architect coming together in a room. And now we are talking about the future of happiness on Mars. So the way we're going to do this is that I'm going to throw some questions on stage, and it's going to be a very casual conversation. Whoever has an idea or wants to share something is welcome to do it. There's no raising your hands or anything. If things get out of hand, I will take over. But thank you, everyone. So we have some questions that we're going to throw on stage, but we'd like to invite our audience, which is like about 200 people. Thank you for coming. To also ask questions in the Q&A section at the bottom. If we find a question that is very relevant and very exciting, we will bring it to the stage towards the end of this session. So without further ado, let's start. So the first question that I had for the room is, so Mars, as you can see on the background pictures that we all have, looks very little like Earth, unless you go to a desert or that place that Julien used to work at. I would like to ask the room, why should we go? Why should we go to Mars?
I can start us off because this is a question that I think about a lot. And I think it's a combination of three things. The first one is that we need a backup for Earth. We need to get humanity to become an interplanetary species because Mars, in the past, some say that used to be like Earth. And some changes happened that made Mars to be the red planet that we know today, but it used to be a blue and green planet like Earth. And some changes may happen here on Earth, so we should have a backup. But the second thing is that everything that we'll discover on Mars, or many things that we potentially can discover on Mars, can help us here on Earth. So the combination of these two things, along with just the human curiosity and exploration nature, is something that brings us to search constantly to what is beyond. And for me, I think that these are the main three things that are the reasons.
I think I want to echo on that is that the human spirit has always been one of exploration. We always want to go beyond what we know and what we have experienced. It's part of our creativity. It's part of not every human, but most humans want to know more. And I think that's part of the reason why we want to go there, as we want to go under the ocean, as we want to go out into those crazy deserts. I live near Death Valley. So yeah, why do people go there? Because they want to, because they want to explore.
We can start seeing Reese exploring.
He's exploring, yeah.
Anybody else? Why should we go to Mars?
Yeah, so
Reese.
okay.
Go for it, Julian.
No, I just want to say that I agree with your second point, which is that we need to explore Mars to know more about ourselves, explore space in general, explore nature, to understand where we come from and how it all got put together somehow, and also in a more philosophical standpoint to see that we actually are in a nice place on Earth. And so in that regard, I really don't agree that Mars is a backup. It was a long time ago that it had a blue side. And I think we better focus on, learning, exploring, yes, but leaving things untouched. That's my personal point of view.
Sort of build on that a little bit. I think that this incredible human spirit to explore and to understand and to know and to continue to grow and even evolve is something which is intrinsic in the human experience. And we have for so long, whole colonization, everything just stretching outwards. And it's interesting to think how we can take that spirit to look inwards. And of course, the fruits of that would be a culture that was more equitable, and we'd be able to understand each other's perspectives better. I mean, we have this inner life also to explore. It would be interesting to go to Mars in order to be able to do that. That the experience that I had going to the South Pole was one that I knew myself better because of where I went. And I think if that comes out of going to Mars, that's great. But I think, humanity is so connected to the Earth that I don't even know. It would take quite a lot of contemplating of who we, and I guess that's the point of this, of what is a human being if it's not on Earth?
I love that question. And actually, let's try to answer it. What is a human being if not on Earth, right? What's about Earth makes it human, makes it connected to us? What would we like to bring to Mars with us? Who would we like to bring to Mars with us to make it more Earth-like, more common to our everyday life?
I just want to add something for the previous question. from an architect's perspective, because my first answer was a very generalist one. And from an architect's perspective, what I see on Earth, that many things that were designed, that we're using today, were designed in times of different social structure. And a lot of times it is hard to change infrastructure. And on Mars, since we don't have anything, and also we have completely different environment and conditions and restrictions, those things can kind of help us create things that are new, that are fitting for our current social structure and our future social structure, or the desired structure that we want, or something that is more with a sense of diversity and equality and many other aspects that we're not much more aware of than we were in the past. And since Mars is so different, there is no way for us to rely on things we know. We are forced to think from first principles and to really think about what we need and what will fit our needs for now. And I think that even as a thought process, as a thought experiment, and not without actually reaching Mars necessarily, I think that in itself is a very big value.
I'm going to go to, I think, you know, thinking about what Anne said too, it is a time when you're going to disconnect from not only from the planet Earth, from the social structures of Earth, and you're going to be with a group of people, a smaller group, we don't know what size, for a prolonged period of time. And I think it would be best if many of the social constructs of this planet were rethought, because you're going to need social connection, you're going to need acceptance of difference, and being able to connect with other people so you know yourself. Because I part of what I do in my work is work on the self. And who are we? Well, part of ourselves is how we interact with others. Part of it is how we interact with ourselves internally. And this is going to be different. Like you say, everything's different. The length of the days, the length of the seasons are different. You never being able to touch anything outside, never feeling the wind outside because you're inside a suit if you go out. All your experiences are going to be totally and completely different. So you need a new social construct.
Reese, you want to say something? Do you want to unmute yourself? How do you think life is going to be on Mars when you grow up?
What do you think?
All right, we'll come back to Reese later. So just to remind everyone, with the rocket and propulsion technology we have today that is common, it will take us between 6 and 8 months to go to Mars. We'll have to stay there about 1.5 years, and then again 6 to 8 months to come back. So imagine being with the same people during this long voyage, and then arriving on a planet that is not the friendliest in the universe for you, where everything has to be brought on site for the most part. And all the food that you bring, you know, will be pre-packed, or hopefully some of it can be grown on site. But a lot of it is very foreign. A lot of it, as Sam and Michal are talking about, are you know, we need to build this new social construct of what life on Mars should be. So I would like to bring the question of what will you, each of you in this room, need to be happy on Mars? And really the question is, what is happiness to you as a human being today?
Yeah, if I could. You know, there's all these amazing stories of people who have suffered isolation or encountered isolation. And what they really, one consistent capacity which has been called upon is an inner life. And we can call that imagination. We can call that, some way to come to yourself. So outside of whatever physical stuff that we need, there's also really this capacity to come back into yourself and have an inner life. If that's meditation or prayer or connection to story and imagination. And culture. To have a way to create culture out of those that you are with and around. That when you have that inner life, then culture can bloom out of that. The imagination that you need to write a poem, or to have a beautiful drawing, or how to have a conversation even.
I like the idea of a Martian culture. That's an interesting idea. And so I need to have purpose. That's why I could be retired, but I'm not. I'm officially retired from teaching at the university, but I have to, the purpose and the creativity there needs to be enough room within that culture to allow people to move. And I love the idea of creating Martian poems, Martian songs, Martian art, and allowing having the freedom to do that and the time to do that. I love that.
I think that when we think about happiness on Mars, it's much different than happiness on Earth. It's not the question of what makes us happy and we can replicate it. We first have to understand, what are we sacrificing to go to Mars? We are leaving our loved ones. We are sacrificing air, like Sam said, or the breeze on our skin. We're sacrificing many, many things. And I think we have to compensate for those things and then add the happiness aspect. And I think that one of the main things, besides having a place that we feel comfortable, not only safe, but comfortable, a place that we can call home, that fits our needs, our unique things that we need in a home, but we need really to have a sense of purpose. I think a lot of astronauts are talking about how space is hard, but because they have a very strong sense of purpose and they know that what they're doing counts, that helps them be more satisfied. And I think knowing that we're doing something that is worthwhile and not just hanging out for the heck of it, I think that is very, very important. I think that to have our physical, psychological, and emotional needs met, taking into consideration all the things that we are sacrificing, is very, very important.
Julien, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the people that do isolation experience on Earth, people that cross the Atlantic rowing or go live in the forest or whatever. I think they probably find happiness in being alone with themselves and with the elements, the universe and, the nature and stuff like that, and having to really make an agenda of their own, which has nothing to do with society. So I think you can thrive for a while with that. But if you listen to them, they also always think about going back to their family, going back to their life. So they are aware that what they do is exceptional. And I think if like the first people that would go to Mars, I think they will be highly trained people, at least, for a long time, for many missions, but still they will have this feeling of doing something exceptional. They will have this feeling of danger and possibly not being able to come back, but they will also have this feeling of, when I come back, I will have the best of the times when I go back, and I think you have to hold on to that. I don't think as humans we can be completely separated from the earth culture. I think, you know, that's really our mothership, if you will. So I think I spoke enough.
No, I love the idea that you bring it up, Julien, about the feeling of coming back, or the yearning for coming back. That's really interesting. I want to come back to that. First, I would like to go to Reese. Hi, Reese. How's your
Hi.
X-Wing? Hey, I had a question for you, Reese. So you're living on Mars right now. What would make you very happy right now?
Probably I'd bring some toys, some books, and other stuff. Yeah, and pictures, of course.
Pictures of what?
Pictures that remind me of my family.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
really sweet. Would you travel with your family, or would you travel alone to Mars?
Well, I don't really like being alone, so I just travel with my family.
Sounds great. Thank you, Reese. All right, so coming back to Julien's point about the feeling of coming back. So let's say we're all on Mars right now, and we are going to experience sooner or later the feeling of wanting to escape, or wanting to come back home, or wanting to come back to something familiar. But for obvious reasons, that's not going to happen, right? We have access to technology, we have access to communication, to things like that can help us you know, release a little something, or access something that can help us calm down and come back to normal life. So what's in your imagination, each of you, would help you you know, get better instantly? If you were feeling that that really really bad feeling of like, I need to be home now, what would you need right now?
I think for me, as someone who traveled and moved around the world a lot, when I got that feeling, I think sensory things, to have the smell or the taste of home. I think that's something that really helps. I think also music is something that kind of can help ground you. And if you're thinking about a technological future, I think that creating a space that reminds me of home, or a room, or a corner, maybe with virtual reality even, to have some people that I love there, although they're not really there, but just to have that sense. But it's important really to have, to incorporate the senses, the smell, the taste, I don't know, texture, maybe textures even. I think those things can really kind of satisfy that urge. I remember that I lived in New York for a few years, and I was far away from home. I'm currently in Tel Aviv, Israel, and by accident, I found a towel that I never used, and it was a towel with the smell of the laundry from home, and that was amazing for me. So I think those kinds of things can be very, very helpful.
I think too that COVID has been a great time to teach us about that. I haven't seen my grandchildren in a year. Okay, so I kind of understand that. My only connection is through you know, media or video chats occasionally. Soon I'm vaccinated, so soon I will see them. So I also know what it's like to come home. I love the idea of connecting, you know, through the senses, but you know, hearing something from a relative. My relatives, my children are very artistic and musical. So hearing a song my son has written, or seeing things that my daughter's done or my grandkids have done, will give me that connection for a time. Okay, but there's going to be a yearning, but I also know there's going to be a yearning from some of them not to come home. That's going to be the interest. What about the people who don't want to come home?
We should remember that Earth is not going down in flames just yet. So Earth is 20 minutes away if we want to contact someone via email or a voice message. We don't have the immediate connection. but we still have that. It's 20 minutes away because there is a 10-minute delay on each side. So we still can get some signals from Earth. And I think we should remember that. That's important. And I think that could be very, very, very helpful. I'm sorry, Julian.
No, I was going to say a bit the same thing. So I think we all had those feelings of like you say, Sam, with COVID, but also with travels, being away for a while and saying like, when I see my son, I will, hug him or things like that. But we're talking about being so far away. On top of that, depending on the position of Mars, having to wait at least a year and a half. And it's true. I mean, some people, there's always in the movie, there is always someone that has nothing to lose and that is actually thriving more than everyone else and doesn't care. So maybe that's the type of people that need to go. Probably not, because also if you want to survive, you want people that want to come back. Anyway, for me, it's nothing compared to the people that used to go on a 2-year trip around the world on a ship in the ocean a few hundred years ago. It's probably nothing also compared to the astronauts that have spent 6 months in the ISS. But or in Antarctica, for example. But when I used to go to the desert to work at this observatory, I would spend 10 to 12 nights there. And I've done it, about 1,000 nights, in fact, in 8 years. And it's just like Mars, I used to put a background of, a green forest on my computer because I was missing it so much. We had a garden, we had a nice residential with, people. It's a beauty of an architect. It's really great, like the place where we sleep there. And we had a critical mass of about 100 people on site every time. So it's not even like what we're talking about, at least in the first few tens of trips, probably. But what I can say is that, and so, okay, there was 1% humidity sometimes. So, you would wake up at night, not breathing well, the eyes completely stuck, the tongue completely dry, these kind of things. Not much, you have water, you have a shower, you have all kinds of things that can fix that. But what I can say is that every time we take the bus down to the airport in Antofagasta, which is a coast city in the north of Chile, the second I would see the ocean, and basically civilization coming back to me and steam, there's this always this like clouds above the sea. I would feel very deeply that I was alive every time. And it was hundreds of times, well, tens of times, let's say 100 times that happened to me in this specific place, in the same road going down from the Parnell Observatory to the Antofagasta coast. And Antofagasta is not a very beautiful city at all, but just to see that. And I also felt, because often it was like the sunset time, depending on the season, but I also felt like I was on this earth, I was connected to it, and I could really enjoy those clouds and this steam and the sun setting. So anyway, that's a little personal story on like going back to life, with going back to the city, to my family, etc., etc.
That's wonderful, Julien. Thanks for sharing something so personal. And even though it's in an extraordinary place and it was your experience, we could all feel it and we could all relate to it, I assume. So we have about 25 minutes left to this event, and I would like to start jumping into the audience's questions. So the first question from Mirka Grozakova. is should we bring as much of Earth as with us as possible when designing the habitats? So perhaps this question will go to Michal. Should we try to make the environment resembling the architecture of Earth rather than trying to come up with something totally different, unknown to us? Would the Earth-like architecture help our psyche?
I think that's a very, very interesting question. We definitely have, since we have so many different aspects of the environment on Mars, it would be a shame not to use it. I mean, on Mars, we have a third of the gravity than Earth. Everything weighs a third, including us. So I think maybe we could use that in the architecture. I think on Mars, since we are in a controlled environment, always, at least until we have, we'll find a way to live outside of Mars unprotected, outside on the land of Mars unprotected, we can create any environment that we want. I think there are many, many things that we can use on Mars and not necessarily completely replicate what we have on Earth. I think it also builds on the last question. I think that we may miss a lot of things, but on Mars, the sky is red and the sunsets are blue. I mean, there's so many things that on Mars can become new habits and new things that we love. I do think that for the sake of the homesick parts, for the sake of the new people on Mars, to have a corner of Earth, to have something that reminds us, somewhere that we can go, that we know is there in case we need it, is important. But for the people that, let's say someone who was born on Mars, I don't know how big of a difference that would make, because they wouldn't know anything else. And I think there are wonderful things that we can use and we can find and we can explore on Mars. So it's definitely something that we, personally, I as an architect, I wouldn't want to try even to replicate. I would want to see what Mars wants. How can we build something that is of Mars and fits its conditions and its opportunities also.
Awesome.
I'd like to, get an echo on that. I think that's wonderful. I think it needs to be a balance. I absolutely think it needs to be a balance between memories and connection to Earth. And because we also, a need of humans is to explore and to be creative. So I would, if I was there, which is doubtful, but I would love to create something new. I was a theatrical designer for a long time, and let me create a totally new environment. You could have one that you could be even more acrobatic in. It would be interesting with the lower gravity. So there could be places of entertainment and play that you could not do on Earth. And I think that would be exciting, be absolutely exciting. So yes, have some Earth, but also have something totally new and different, exploring this new place and the new colors and the new gravity, all that.
Sam, I love that you bring up the subject of sports. I've had conversations with people about the future of Space Olympics, right? Wouldn't that be super fun to watch? I'm not entirely sure what that would be.
Soccer on low gravity? Oh, right.
All right, let's jump to the next question because we have quite a few. So RP Oates is asking, a lot of how culture is developed is through the human ability to absorb a landscape and produce language that represents agency within that environment. Considering Mars is a relatively barren landscape to Earth, do you think language or culture will be more rich on Mars eventually?
More rich is an interesting word. More, I don't know if it'll be richer. I think it'll be different.
Anybody wants to develop the idea of how different?
I think that since the people that will go to Mars are not necessarily of one place and of one culture, I think that's an amazing opportunity to kind of, you know, if I go there and let's say I don't speak English, I speak only Hebrew, and an American goes there and someone with a few different languages, and how do we communicate? I think that pretty quickly we will need to find a common ground, a common way to communicate, there will be the Martian culture, because we will have no choice but to invent it in order to communicate with the people that we find ourselves with there.
Yeah, that moment when the first astronauts saw the Earth from space, and how that really grew within humanity a capacity to have a sense of humanity, a wholeness, and not this divisive, nationalistic, and individualized perspectives. It would be, in terms of the culture on Mars, that really would be something of, and people are asking about what language and so forth, that yeah, how amazing to actually have a first human culture. I mean, outside of, I guess, the space station or a few other scientific spots, but really one that would need to find its identity in order to survive.
I was thinking last night about, could we, exploring what you could create with the elements on Mars. Could we create Martian glass that could be part of our structures? Could we create things from the elements there, not things that we brought? Maybe we brought some parts of it, but from the elements there that would become habitats. So then we become a part of Mars rather than actually invaders.
It's funny, some people feel very uncomfortable with using the word colonizing Mars. They prefer the word settling on Mars, or exploring Mars. Yeah, I mean, actually, I think there's a question about policy a little bit later. We'll jump into that. But before we go there, I have a question from Serena Michaels, and this question is for Reese. Reese, I have a question for you. Where did it go? Okay, what is your dream job on Mars, Reese? What do you want to do when you grow up and live on Mars?
Just tell them.
Structural engineer.
You want to be a structural engineer? Is that what you said?
Yes.
That's really cool. What do you want to build?
I don't know.
What do you want to build?
Mm.
Do you want to build habitats? Do you want to build bridges?
Well, if I will build a bridge on Mars, then I had to bring some iron.
Yeah. Do you think you have to bring it from Earth, or there's iron on Mars already?
Huh? There's iron on Mars.
All right. Cool. Thank you, Reese. All right, let's move on to the next.
Products to get the iron, to get real iron.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, next question is from Piotr. And you had something to say?
Yeah, just to toss that out there, because that's a wonderful thought of, like, does Mars want us there? And is it just because there isn't a population there that the question would need to go to the population, but just sort of like, how would that be for Mars to have humans there?
Actually, I would love for Julien to answer that question.
Well, I'm not an expert really on what is on Mars actually, and we are looking for it. We know that there might be in the past life and microorganisms, but this hasn't been demonstrated yet, and that's why we as a people on this planet send rovers on there to explore, and that's also to understand how things changed. How did you go from this planet that was more habitable to this planet that is not really habitable anymore and probably not livable at all? I don't really know. I mean, to me, project, it's a very interesting exercise to project ourselves like that. How to live, how to make a culture, how to build structural habitat and things like that, and bridges on Mars. I find it hard to, I find the leap so big with respect to what we can do, and that it's hard for me to even have this conversation, because we can't even do that on Earth. I mean, we have issues to do that on Earth. We can't thrive. We have, we never stop fighting each other. I mean, we have nice experiences of people from different cultures getting together and speaking the same language sometimes, and but we have a lot of problems to solve, basically. So maybe solving problems to go to Mars as an exploration, in my view, with a certain ethical framework, will help us solve problems on Earth, and that's interesting. But I don't even know where I started.
Sounds good. All right, let's move on to the next question from Peter. How would community on Mars be governed? Shouldn't we become a nation of humanity that is united enough on Earth to be able to create another unit of society on another planet? Taking into account distance and different challenges on both planets, how long do you think it will take before both planetary communities would break up into two independent nations? That's a very interesting question. If
I'm
Sam,
gonna
I
jump
think you
in
talked.
there. Oh, there we go. Okay. Not necessarily, because we have a long history as humans of doing things as a unit for a period of time and having some cohesion. Okay. I was a touring actor for many years. We had a governing body of, you have your tour manager is the head of your touring company, and you can survive that. Okay, there's enough latitude to survive. So now, if you're talking about long term, like people were going to live there for maybe the rest of their lives, then we may have issues with more political issues.
I think
All
that
right.
also we have to keep in mind that that's very interesting. Like how when humans landed on the moon, it was something that was very, very global. Also, not so happy thing. The pandemic is something that is very, very global. I mean, we can there are things that unite us, and hopefully more positive things than negative. But if we would stay on Mars, we will live on Mars for a few hundred or thousands of years. They say that, I heard a research saying that evolution will be accelerated on Mars. And at one point we'll become Martians, and we will not be able to reproduce with people from Earth anymore. So that is something that may happen physiologically through evolution, before or after we will separate culturally, etc.
Awesome. All right, next question is from Mark Waters. Hi, Mark. So Mark is based in Wales and is doing a lot of work with kids there in space education. So his question is, would a Mars settler who is born on Mars be a humanoid, a Martian, or could they be both? When would this transition start? First, second, third generation?
Did you ask somebody in particular that question? Is there one of
No.
the panels? I mean, because of course,
Anybody.
what do I know? But that, how people that are on the space station for a year, they have those physiological changes, right? Like they get shorter or something like that. So, I mean, they get taller. Thank you. I suppose the no gravity thing. And that, so there would be some things like that. I mean, things often come in threes, so maybe 3 generations. Hard to know. Do you think there is a type of science that could make some guesses about that, or does anybody know?
And we didn't hear your last question.
Oh, I wonder who would have an inkling of that? What type of scientists would make conjectures on that?
And I think it would also be fairly individualistic too. There's some that would consider themselves Martians by just living there. And others would yearn to be back on Earth, just we talked about before. Even once born on Mars, some of them may, by seeing pictures and hearing stories, yearn to go back to Earth. So I think somebody could probably make a generalization about that, but I think that's all it would be.
It reminds me that when I was living in New York, there was a one point that you can't really measure that I started to dream in English. So I think that is very individual, because sometimes something happens and something shifts, and we can't really predict when is it going to happen. It can be quick for some people, and for those who are yearning and missing Earth, maybe it will take longer.
All right, so this question is probably for Michal. Halime Gözlükkaya is asking, how will the settlements be on Mars, especially in the use of technology and residential areas? What will be the difference in this respect from the world? What's the difference with Earth, basically?
Wow, it will be very different. First, it will be smaller. It will be smaller spaces. We will not have, at the beginning at least, a few tens or hundreds of years, we will not have a lot of resources. So we will be forced to fit things into small places. So we will have to deal with living in smaller places, sharing a lot of common places, kind of like things that are happening here on Earth in a lot of urban places. But there, it will be something that is like that from the start. So the size is a big thing, because we will be limited with resources. Another thing, I did my first Martian habitat that I designed. I thought that from research about Earth and what spaces are not comfortable, we could eliminate a lot of things from the get-go there. I created habitats that are circular, and there were completely no dead ends ever. So you can't get stuck in a dead end. I also thought that elevators and staircases are something that we're using to go up and down buildings for centuries. If we were talking about staircases, maybe we can use something else. Maybe we can use the gravity of Mars to go vertically in buildings a different way. Also, if you get stuck in an elevator with someone you don't really like for a minute or a few seconds, you can't escape. Maybe it's something that we should kind of keep in the past, and maybe we can have suction boosters on the ceilings, and they can help us jump up and down and prevent our fall. I mean, we can do a lot of things, a lot of different things architecturally on Mars. But one thing we have to remember is that there is a lot of radiation on Mars. So we will always have to be protected. It can be under a very thick layer of water or ice. It can be underground. So there are certain things there that will force us to have different types of architecture.
Thank you so much.
The elevator ride lasts for 6 to 8 months, by the way, in this case.
And thinking, go ahead. Thinking also then just, how culture would develop. Of course, culture and architecture, go hand in hand. And so it would be that if we are in smaller spaces, the culture that would develop would either be more able to cope with limited private space, or it would drive people, more crazy more quickly, so to speak. If you don't have your own, we need so much private space these days, where we are in our evolution.
I think in part of that, without that private space, is to have more tolerance for difference and what people want and need. You see somebody reading by themselves, you may just, you learn to leave them alone and to be quiet. And so there's a lot of, so there's going to be some changes in that. Just the fact that we can't go outside will have a sense, or can't go outside without donning a lot of equipment, which makes you really isolated inside a suit. I'm a tad bit claustrophobic. I know that the first few times would be very difficult for me to be in that suit. Because I've done some stuff underwater, and it's even that is a little claustrophobic to me. So that'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So that loss of ability just to get away from everybody.
It's already hard to keep a mask on for a few hours, right, without scratching. It's when I wear a helmet, I want to scratch my head and I can't, So imagine being in a spacesuit that is like way more sealed than that, and being on a small exploration a few miles away from the habitat and not being able to scratch your head. Just having fun here. But yeah, I think, we all saw documentaries about certain tribes that still live with a few family members, several families maybe, and each person has a role, and they happily live in basically autonomy. Sometimes they are nomadic, sometimes they had to settle somewhere on Earth and adapt. So I think, if you were to plan something like that, which I don't think we are, even in a lot of time, but I think you would need to look at the work of anthropologists and study those tribes or those settlements that happen on Earth, because there are formulas, not formulas, but there are recipes maybe for disaster, or recipes that work in terms of human behavior interaction, and so that everyone feels at his or her or their place, basically in such a small, limited community with with a lot of limitations, basically.
Awesome. We are about 3 minutes from the end of this event, so I'm going to ask one more question before closing down. Unfortunately, we've received so many interesting questions related to Mars, related to happiness, related to the future of humanity on this planet. So the last question is from Dina Daniel. How will a different night sky lead to different mythologies and relationships with the cosmos when living and developing on Mars? I would love to hear Anne, perhaps Sam, answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine how much has informed what it means to be a human being by the zodiac. And, I'm sure, most people have had some experience of, oh yeah, you're really a Virgo, that kind of a thing. Like there is some truth that comes through into our culture from the zodiac that we perceive right now. So how many millennia would go by drinking? Is there a night sky in Mars? I don't even know. But, drinking in that, really that message from the stars. I mean, that's how culture developed, was this capacity, this openness to understand what the stars were saying. I mean, our consciousness today, our capacities as human beings are different than they were at, in the times, the Babylonian and Egyptian and prior. So there's this, there's a thought that, that the stars spoke once to humanity. We can see that in the mythologies which created our cultures of today. So if humans begin a new journey on Mars, then the millennia that it might take to have this speaking of the stars to humans in a different way. But of course, it would affect the mythology and the story.
I think I agree with you, Anne, and I think a part of it that goes into that is, how do we explain those things we have no power over, like weather and these change? That's a lot of how we develop our mythology, is how do I explain the storms? How do I calm myself during times when things are happening, disastrous things are happening, and I have no power over it. Who do I go to in my mind? Who do I go to in my spirit?
All right, so this is going to close our panel today. Thank you everyone for joining us in this thought experiment about what the future of happiness on Mars is. I would like to thank Reese, Michal, Sam, Julien, and Anne for participating to this. I would like to thank the nonfiction team, Fee, Nadia, and Martis for coordinating and answering questions and entertaining the audience. Of course, the audience, if you have more questions, I know there's a lot of them that were not answered today, please go on our LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever and ask the question, tag us. I believe our team is going to share all of our social media links. So Fee, if you can share the screen for the closing slide, that'd be great. Awesome. So this event today, The Future of Happiness on Mars, was put together by Nonfiction. It was actually also co-organized by an organization called School of Becoming, which is part of the University of Toronto in Toronto. So Nonfiction, which is the company I'm a partner at, is a hardware architecture, branding and systems design company. We're based in San Francisco. What we do all day long is we turn science fiction into reality for a better future. Because of my background in space architecture, we're working a lot on the future of human and their happiness in space, whether in microgravity or partial gravity. So if you want to know more about us, please go to our websites, www.nonfiction.design. And we're done. So thank you everyone for joining us. Here are some handles if you want to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Please be sure to also follow the people who were on the panel today. Wonderful people, so much to say. I feel like we just opened an amazing can of worms about what the future of happiness is on Mars. So thank you everyone. Hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.